Chapter 4, Lesson 1. We often listen to an epic piece of orchestral music and think, how the heck did the composer put all this together? It seems so complicated, like magic, a mystery. I'll never be able to do this. Well, actually you can, and in this lesson we're going to talk about the concept of a musical cell. The thing is, when we listen to John Williams's score for Star Wars or Hans Zimmer's music for Pirates of the Caribbean, sure, the end result sounds complex and intricate, but when you strip it all back, an orchestral piece is really just built from 2 or 3 notes. And this is what we call a musical cell. Now you're probably thinking, what on earth is actually a musical cell? Well, in film music, we also like to call it this other fancy word, leitmotif. A leitmotif is a short, recurring musical idea that is often attached to a particular character, place, or situation. This leitmotif can return in different forms, played by different instruments, in different speeds, and even with different harmonies underneath. But the audience can always recognize it as that original cell. We often think we have to write a long, complex melody with twists and turns that follows some magical rules of music theory. We often think this melody has to be accompanied by equally complex harmonies that morph and change constantly. I mean, where do you even begin to write an orchestral piece? It sounds far too overwhelming and far too complicated, right? Well, the answer is that actually you can build an entire orchestral piece on only 3 or 4 notes. That sounds crazy and super simple, but it's completely true. Beethoven did it with his famous 5th Symphony. These famous 4 notes, G to E flat, F to D, which you can see highlighted here, these 4 notes make up his cell, and Beethoven crafts his entire 5th Symphony off these 4 notes. Let's take a quick listen to Beethoven's 5th Symphony to hear how he uses those famous 4 notes. We'll look at this in more depth next lesson. We'll analyze how he's actually done this, but for now, just try and listen out for all the times those 4 notes come back in different ways. Sometimes they might be different speeds or different instruments or in different keys, but see if you can listen out and hear how many times that little cell returns. Also, think about the music to Jaws. This cell is the simplest of them all, just 2 notes a semitone apart. We all know these 2 notes were incredibly powerful in inviting fear into the hearts of millions of moviegoers. You can listen to this famous soundtrack from Jaws below this lesson video, and honestly, it's amazing to listen to how those 2 notes really form the basis for the entire score. So these are just 2 examples of many more pieces of music that use a very simple cell as their musical starting point. So let's ditch the idea of writing a bunch of long, complex melodies and harmonies. That's just a recipe for an orchestral mess. Trust me, all you need is 3 or 4 well thought out notes, your musical cell. And the simpler, the better. Once we have this cell, throughout the coming lessons, I'm going to show you how you can expand on this cell and develop it into a melody, a harmony, a bass line, and how to expand it into a much larger orchestral work. But what we need is this seed. Everything we do with your music from now on will come from this musical cell. So it's important that you spend a bit of time getting this right. Now, just to be clear, a cell is not a harmony or a chord progression. It's normally just a very, very short, simple melodic snippet that contains 2, 3, or 4 notes. This musical cell is like the seed from which the rest of your music will grow. Something like this is a good example of a cell. Now, that doesn't sound very exciting on its own, but this was actually the cell used by twice Oscar-nominated Australian film composer David Hirschfelder. This simple little cell became the main theme for the movie The Dressmaker, starring Kate Winslet. Take a listen to how David has used this simple little cell by listening to an example from The Dressmaker below the lesson video. In the following lessons, we'll look at how David developed this very simple cell into an award-winning film score. Your job for this lesson is to find 3 or 4 notes that will become your cell. Now, let's experiment with how you might come up with a musical cell. Where do you get these 2, 3, or 4 notes? I like to start with something that connects back to some of the original musical ingredients that I've already brainstormed from earlier. So in your improvisation stage, you may have already accidentally stumbled across a cell. Last lesson, I spent some time at the piano improvising around some of these mind map ideas, and hopefully you've also done the same thing with your musical ingredients and your ideas from last lesson. So here are a few of the basic ideas that came out from my improvisation session. By the way, you can download the audio and MIDI files of this music to use in your own compositions if you wish. I'm giving you full permission to do whatever you like with these files, guys, so feel free to drag the MIDI into your own DAW, change the tempo, change the instruments, rework it, mess around with it, and use it however you like. You can also import and use the audio file if you feel more comfortable working that way. So go ahead and make use of this music if it resonates with you. You can download all these audio and MIDI files by clicking the link below the lesson video. Now, those cascading downwards notes that I improvised are kind of cool, but even this is probably too long and complex for a cell. We really want our cell to be 2 or 3 notes maximum. It should be really, really simple. If your cell is too complex, it's going to be really hard to develop it, expand on it, and use it throughout your orchestral piece. Remember how simple David's main theme for The Dressmaker was, or how incredibly simple that cell from the Jaws music is? Simple is good. Now, I find that a hard concept to live by as a composer, and perhaps you do too. As music creators, we often feel like it's not good enough if it's not complex enough. But it's actually the opposite. And I've learned that time and time again throughout my career, my most successful, my most well-received, and my most awarded compositions have actually been the simplest. Writing music is like writing poetry. We want to say the most with the least amount of words. Okay, cool. Now that you're all good with simplicity, let's workshop a few ideas and find a simple cell that we can settle on and build our orchestral piece with. I'll take you through how to do all of this in the next lesson.